Okay, let's kick off. I'm sure other people can join as we're doing the intros. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. We've got a really busy agenda today. A few words from me only, and then Pete will take you through the readiness assessment too, looking at each question and providing guidance along the way. And we're going to be using Slido, which I think some of you have used before, to gather questions throughout the session. Instead of waiting till the end, we're going to stop after each section of the readiness assessment so we can go through the most voted questions, and Ewan will be looking after that for us. And we might also have some time at the end for some final questions that we've not had a chance to pick up along the way. So the purpose of the webinar is to build awareness of the upcoming readiness assessment and to provide you with guidance in answering the survey's questions so that you feel really informed as you go into them and prepared. So please do ask questions along the way to help you do that. So the questionnaire will be available to participants on the 19th of September. And having listened to you, we've extended that from 2 weeks to 3 weeks to respond, and Pete will go through the details of that in the session. Why do we do our readiness assessments? Well, it really helps you check that you're ready for change and to focus on the most critical areas of the programme. And as before, we're asking for evidence in these areas. It also allows you to flag if you need more support from the programme in specific areas. And then for the programme team, the collective responses allow us to build a view of industry status, and that informs key decision making as we approach the next programme milestone. And then we can also see where there are common risks and pain points across the industry, so we can identify some priority action and help support the programme. So as I said, we are going to be using Slido. So if you just click on to the next slide for me, Pete, and they'll be voted for. So this is your Slido code. So please join using the code RA2. I wonder how long it took us to think of that one. And I'm now going to hand over to Pete, who will take you through the survey details.
Yes, thanks, Jackie. And for those of you I haven't met before, my name is Pete, and I'm the readiness assessment lead on the programme. So I've been helping to shape these questions over the past month or so. Just before we dig into the actual 29 questions themselves, I'm just going to cover a few slides here which give an overview of the purpose of the RA2, the timelines that we're going to be following, and also some of the lessons learned from Readiness Assessment 1 that we've taken into account this time around. So not to repeat what Jackie said there, but I think one of the main reasons we're doing this is to get an understanding of the progress that yourselves have made across the industry, and then use the data that we glean from this survey to help the SRO to make really important decisions on the programme, in particular at Milestone 3, which is coming up at the end of October, which we'll address more later. And finally, there, just to get some feedback from yourselves on issues like comms and the programme in general, and also to help to understand any requests for support that you might have and understand what you need in that area. So in terms of the 6 sections that RA2 will be divided up into, we've got 29 questions split across those sections, but they're certainly not equal in terms of the number of questions per section. So I would certainly say the main section we're going to be looking at is that first one you see there, the criteria for Milestone 3. And I think most of you will probably be familiar with CR9, and if you revisit that, you will find a set of conditions that need to be met by any participant in order for them to be deemed ready to start DBT. And RA2 really focuses in upon that set of conditions laid out in CR9 to make sure that everyone is ready to start DBT. In terms of other sections, we can move down to service providers. So that's a fairly broad section which looks at the state of play that each participant is in terms of sourcing their providers of IT, data, or metering services, as it may be. And then we've got a very short section on migration. I think it's just a couple of questions looking at to see if any thoughts currently been given on how we're going to move across to the new MHHS arrangements. In the top right there, we've got a section on testing. And I think the key area of that is really to understand the appetite that people have got at this stage in order to participate in integration testing. And then we move on to the questions around feedback, things for like comms, the PPC's performance thus far, and allowing you to make any requests for additional support. And then the final section we've got there is administrative questions. So I think that'll be a very easy one for us to fly through today. It's mainly just the name of your organisation and the constituency that you belong to. So I'll just tick over to the timelines we've got in for Readiness Assessment 2 at the moment, and I don't propose to talk about every single date on this slide, although you will have access to it on the collaboration base after the meeting. I think key dates for you to be aware of on this slide are the 19th of September, so that's when the RE2 questions are going to be sent out to you, and the 7th of October, so that's when we've got all RE2 responses due by. So that's a 3-week window in order to submit responses. And you've also got 3 weeks essentially between now and the 19th of September, whereby you will have access to these questions on the collaboration base, but you won't be able to submit your answer. So that access you'll have on the collaboration base is simply to an Excel file. And to be clear, we're not asking you to submit a response in Excel. That's just for your information, so you can distribute the questions internally. We want all responses to be done on MS Forms, and you'll receive a link sent to the principal contacts in your organisation on the 19th of September for that. I just wanted to touch on deep dive interviews as well. So some of you will be familiar with deep dive interviews from Readiness Assessment number 1. They're essentially 45-minute sessions where I and a few colleagues will ask members of your organisation some more detailed questions about the responses that you've given, and perhaps ask you to present a few of the pieces of evidence that you've attached. In terms of how we're going to be running this, it's very similar to last time in the sense of we have 20 participants that we're going to ask to go through a deep dive interview, and that forms about 10% of the total population, given that we have about 200 participants in total. 14 of those participants we're going to be selecting in advance, and that's essentially done at random, but just making sure that we have a good cross-section of the various different constituencies we have. And then 6 of the 20, those slots we're going to hold back and select those on the 10th of September based upon the content of the responses that certain participants have submitted, i.e. the people that we want to speak to about their responses. And finally, I just wanted to call out how reporting is going to be done for RA2. So we're going to be producing 2 separate reports, the first of which is going to be produced in the run-up to the M3 decision, so right at the back end of October, and that's just going to focus on the responses to the M3 relevant questions that we've got in this RA2 survey. And then the second report we're going to be doing is more going to be produced at the back end of November. So that's going to be the overall holistic report that encompasses all of the different questions. And that's going to be ready at the end of November, going into the December PSG. And finally, before I pause to take questions, I'm just going to cover a couple of these lessons learned. I'm not proposing to go through all of them, but I think the top 3 I've got down here are the most important ones. So first of all, on this occasion in RA2, we're not going to be permitting software providers to submit responses on behalf of their clients. That was permitted in RA1, but that was a lesson learned that didn't work particularly well. So we're going to be asking all participants to submit their own individual response. What we will permit is participants to reference their software provider response to certain questions. So if it's a question that only a software provider would have knowledge of, and we wouldn't expect the client to have knowledge of it, something perhaps more technical related to testing perhaps, under conditions such as that, and if the software provider has agreed that their response can be referenced by their client, then we will accept that to be done. And we'll come to an example of that later when we deal with the individual questions. The second one there, I think we've addressed this already, but in terms of the PPC, understanding that more response time is needed for participants, even if that's only just to get internal sign-off, we've got stretched that window from 2 to 3 weeks, and you'll have access to the questions even 3 weeks before that from today. And thirdly, in terms of giving more notice of deep dive selection, so in RA1, all deep dive participants were notified on the first day of results coming in. This time around, the majority of participants will be informed on the day we send out the survey, 19th of September. So that's a lot more notice in order to book a date and line up the various stakeholders on your side to attend that meeting. So I'll just pause there and see if we've got any questions on Slido. Is there anything come through yet, Ewan?
Pete. Hi, Pete. We have one question on the Slido so far. And the first question is, can you confirm if you did a deep dive in RA1, we will not be selected for RA2 deep dive?
Yes, so that was one of the principles we laid out in the readiness assessment strategy right at the start of the process. Essentially, the answer is yes. The only caveat I'd put around it is that we have said if the performance in that deep dive wasn't particularly good, then there is the possibility of being revisited in the next readiness assessment if we think that your organisation is perhaps an area of concern for us. But I would say that would be a rare occurrence. The general principle is if you were selected in the previous deep dive, you won't be reselected in the next one, because we don't want to put the burden of those deep dives all onto the same participants every time.
Lovely. Thanks, Peter. No more questions for the time being.
Great. Okay, so with that, I will move on to the individual questions themselves. I think we're keeping fairly good times thus far. So this is the readiness assessment itself. As I've said before, there are 29 questions in total, but each of those, or nearly all of those, have their own comments box attached to them. So therefore, the total, as it would appear, is that there are 57 questions, but I can promise you it's really just 29. It's just the additional comment boxes that will making it appear as much larger than that. And so across these 6 sections, what I'm going to do is go through the questions in each section without interruption, as it were, and then I'll pause for a Q&A at the end of each section just to see if there's anything come through. So you'll receive a link via email that will take you to this landing page to complete the survey. It'll be done via the collaboration base as well, so you will need a collaboration-based login in order to access it. But I think for nearly everyone on this call, that won't be a problem. So the first question, very simple. What's the name of your organisation? I'm not anticipating too many difficulties there, but I've just put in test for the sake of completing the survey on this call. Which constituency on the MHHS programme does your organisation belong to? Tick all that apply. Again, just for the sake of argument, I've ticked small supplier and software provider, but you should see all of the different constituencies listed here. It's just a case of ticking the right ones. And then the final question in this section is a slightly longer one, but I'll read it out. If you're responding on behalf of another organisation, please list the organisations that you're responding on behalf of. So, for example, if you're a supplier responding on behalf of a supplier agent, please state this here. But also, please note that participants cannot delegate the responsibility to respond to RA2 to their software providers. However, participants may reference their software provider's response for certain questions if this is agreed between them and the question directly references technical elements of the program which only the software provider has knowledge of. So, for example, we could accept, please see the answer for this question provided in the response by our software provider, organisation X, and you just state the name. But again, I can't emphasize enough that it needs to be an agreement between the participant and the software provider that it's okay to reference that response. Okay, I'll just pause there. Any other questions, Ian?
Nothing for the time being, Pete.
Okay, thanks. I'll move on to the next one then. So this is by far the longest section of the readiness assessment, and these are the questions relating to milestone 3. So I'll kick off with the first question, and this really gets to the crux of that milestone 3 decision about whether or not participants are ready to start DBT. So please select the approximate date on which your organisation became or will become ready to start your design, build and test. If you do not have an estimate of when this will be, then please leave this question blank and don't select a date. But please note that the conditions for DBT readiness have been listed in CR9, which we'll link here once we send out the full survey, and that the questions which follow in this RE2 survey will refer to the conditions in CR9. So participants' DBT is expected to begin following milestone 3 on the 1st of November 2022 at the latest. So essentially, if you've already got to the point at which you're ready to start DBT, you'd select a date in the past. So for example, if I were to go into this date selection now and say 1st of August, that was when my organisation was ready to start DBT. Similarly, if you're planning for that date to be some point in the future, you'd go in and perhaps select the 1st of November, which is the date we're expecting people to adhere to. But as the question states there, if you're not sure of when that will be ready, just leave the question blank. So on to the next question. If you've indicated that you may not be in a position to start DBT on the 1st of November 2022, please select the main reasons for this. So hopefully most people will be ticking the top box here, which says it's not applicable. My organisation will be ready to start on or before 1st of November. But then we've got a few potential options here as to why that might not be the case. So market conditions diverting available resources, faster switching, post-go-live activities diverting available resources, issues with IT service providers, and we'd like to specify what those are, if so. And the penultimate one, requiring more information from the MHS programme team. Again, please specify. And then any other issues you might be experiencing, which means that your organisation won't be ready to start DBT come 1st of November. Again, the comments box is there for details on that one. So to move to the next question, please select the approximate date on which your organisation created or updated your programme plan and ensure that it meets the criteria below. So if you don't have an estimate of when this will be, then please leave the question blank again. And we set out a few different criteria here for the programme plan to meet. So firstly, the plan provides sufficient detail for the next stage of delivery activities. The plan includes a resource plan showing delivery teams in place to consume the MHHS design and commence DBT following M3. The plan outlines delivery stages from now until the end of the MHHS programme. And finally, the plan lands to the latest version of the MHHS programme's revised programme plan. So that link will be added once we reach round 2 of the replanning activities, which will be next month. So as I say, that will be all up to date when it's sent out to you on the 19th of September. On to question 11 then. So please select the approximate date on which organisation signed off or will sign off an outline business case or other funding instrument to cover at least the next 6 months of your delivery plan. And if you don't have an estimate of when it will be, then please leave the question blank. So again, we're not overly particular about this being a specific business case. I know, having spoken to a number of organisations, they don't work in that way. It won't be a formalised business case that goes through several rounds of sign-off. Whatever that funding instrument may be for your particular organisation, that's all we're looking for there in terms of that date. The next question, this will be familiar to those of you who filled out readiness assessment number 1, and apologies that many of you will already provided us with this information, but it's still something that we're still waiting for from quite a few participants. So the question is, how many of the roles in your 6 points of contact are currently filled? Please tick all of those that have been filled. So please upload the named individuals in your organisation alongside their roles and email addresses for these 6 roles as evidence to support your answer at the end of this survey. If you've named the same individual for more than one role or have not filled certain roles, please state the reason for this in the evidence upload or the comments box that follows the question. If you've already provided these names to the PPC previously, then you don't need to attach this evidence again. So as I say, I'm anticipating a lot of you will probably already have given us that information. If so, if you just drop a comment into the box here just saying already provided this information, then that would be very helpful for us, so we don't need to necessarily go searching for it. Okay, so on to question number 15. To what extent do you agree with the following statement? The relevant resources in my organisation and our contracted IT service providers will have a sufficient understanding of the MHHS programme target operating model to allow DBT to begin on or before 1st of November 2022. So for that, again, for those of you familiar with CR9, this is essentially regurgitating one of the conditions that was set out in CR9 for an organisation to be ready to start their DBT on 1st of November. So I'd recommend, if you wanted to get a bit more insight into some of these questions, digging out CR9, because that's where a lot of them are derived from. And very much the same for the next 2 questions we're going to look at here. So to what extent do you agree with the following statement? The relevant resources in my organisation and contracted IT service providers will have sufficient understanding of the MHHS programme design to allow DBT to begin on 1st of November. And I won't bother reading out question 19 because it's very much the same wording. It's just a slight shift, so that instead of talking about the target operating model or talking about the design, on this occasion we're talking about the MHHS programme plan. But other than that, it's very much the same question. So to move on to question 20. So please select the approximate date on which your organisation completed or will complete a high-level impact assessment of the MHHS design, which meets the criteria below. There's 5 different elements to the criteria we've set out here. First of which is the assessment considers the impact on all areas of the participant's organisation that may be affected by MHHS changes. And I appreciate that's relatively broad in terms of the language there, but we can't be too specific given that we have lots of different types of organisation taking this survey. A scoring system is used, such as red, amber, green, but doesn't have to be that exact scoring system, to indicate the extent of the impact in each area of the organisation that may be affected by MHHS. At a high level, the impact is assessed in terms of the scale of change needed, expected spend and timelines to implement it. Next steps to address the impact are in place, and awareness of risks, sometimes issues and dependencies is demonstrated. So as with all questions whereby we're asking for a date, if you don't have an estimate of when that will be, then please leave the question blank. And similarly, we're looking for an upload of evidence come the end of the survey in support of the answer. Moving on to question number 23. I appreciate there are probably some questions already ready, but I'll pause to take them at the end of the section. Question 23. Which areas of your business do you anticipate being impacted by the MHHS programme? Please select all that apply. So this is essentially a shortlist that we've created to prompt ideas, but similarly feel free to click the other box there and add some additional areas of the business that will be in the comments box. The rationale for this question is really that we want to try and understand if there are any organisations that may have missed a potential impact on an area of their business. So for example, if 95 or 97% of suppliers think that their billing department will be impacted, we'd then have that as a point to raise with the other 3 or 5% who haven't thought their billing area was going to be impacted, and just make sure that we can overlook that. And moving on to question 25, will you be using a third-party IT service provider to deliver any of your system changes for MHHS? Please tick all that apply. And in the comments box, please indicate which systems or services that are relevant to MHHS will be provided through each means. So the example we've given there is settlement and billing changes will be provided in-house, but will go to market for adapter services. And that's why we've offered the ability to click more than one box here, because we appreciate that some services you might need to provide in-house or whatever it might be, whereas others you choose a different solution. And on to number 27, if you are using an IT service provider for any of your system changes, when do you expect to have completed signing contracts with them all? So please upload your procurement plan as evidence to support your answer at the end of this survey. The details should include details of the services to be provided, the process for selecting the service provider, and expected timelines for selecting the service provider. But similarly, if you don't intend to go to market for IT services or don't have an estimate yet of when that will be, then please leave the question blank. And final question in this section, if you're delivering any of your system changes using an in-house capability, when do you expect to have secured the appropriate resources to begin delivery of those changes? So please upload your internal plans for DBT as evidence in support of your answer at the end of this survey. And again, that should include details of activities to be undertaken by the in-house team, process for assembling that in-house team, and the expected timelines for standing up the team and beginning work. But as always, if you don't intend to make system changes in-house or you don't have an estimate of when appropriate resources will be in place to do so, then please leave that question blank. I was anticipating a question here, might be preempting it, is that when we've asked here for internal plans for DBT, I appreciate that may be an overlap with your program plan. If you think that the program plan provides the level of detail that's been asked for in this question, then please feel free to just put a comment in the next box saying detail provided within the program plan, but obviously then we'll then go back and check that is hitting the criteria that's been stated there. So I'll pause there. Anything in the Q&A, Ewan?
Yeah, hi Pete. Quite a few questions actually. We will go through. There's actually 6 questions. So we have our first question. In the replan, there is a 3-month period for IA and sourcing. How will this work with the 1st November timeline? I believe Jason, who's just come on camera, might be able to help answer this question.
Yeah, I saw Lewis came up as well, so I didn't see that you were on the hit list, Lewis. But the 3-month period for impact assessment and sourcing are the first activities that we put in the program plan in the DBT phase. So we have listened to the feedback we had through the planning workshops and included that as the first activities in DBT. Now it might be that a number of you are in a position where you've already made some of those decisions around sourcing, but it aligns with 1st of November because it's the first activities that sit in the DBT phase.
Lovely. Thank you, Jason. That sort of segues quite nicely into the second question, which is, does the 1st of November timeline depend on the replan assessment in flight?
1st of November will be the start of the 3rd consultation period on the replan. We have again listened to industry, and we've introduced a 3rd consultation period into the replanning exercise post the design baseline. So the expectation, there's another question later around assumptions around M5 being baseline. So the expectation, we are still on plan to have M5 baseline by the end of October. As Pete showed in the earlier timeline, the RA2 questions around M3 and the kickoff for design, build and test will then feed into the M3 decision into the November PSG. Thank you, Pete, for bringing that up. So yeah, that's how that feeds in, and the planning consultation starts at the beginning of November post the M5 baselining.
Lovely, thank you, Jason. Next question specifically refers to question 13, Pete. If the roles are filled by a third party rather than directly, do we tick them?
So all we've said there is that we're looking for a rationale to explain if the roles are repeated or if the roles are held by a third party. I think that's okay as long as the rationale is solid and that's outlined in the comments box next to it. So I know, for example, there are a lot of smaller providers that don't have the resources to provide discrete individuals for all of these roles. that's fine. As long as we understand that, then that won't be a problem.
Lovely, thank you, Pete. I think another question for you here as well. The first slide says there are 29 questions in total. There are 30 questions in the first section alone. How many questions are there in total?
So, as I mentioned at the start, it may look as if there are 57 questions in this deck, but that's because nearly every question has a comments box attached to it. So I wouldn't term a comments box to be a separate question. So in reality, there are 29 questions and nearly each one of those has a comments box.
Sounds like a formatting issue there. Thank you for that, Pete.
Yeah.
Question
dictates that. I'm not in control of them being separate questions, I'm afraid.
Exactly. Next question is on Helix. So as Alexon, Helix is already 4 months into DBT and on track against the original MHHS timeline. Do we need to respond to R82? Who might that be for?
I think the answer is yes to that.
Yeah, there aren't any exceptions, are there?
No.
Nope.
We're expecting a very positive response, Lee. So yeah, hopefully good news story.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason. So that's a yes answer to that one. Lovely. So next question was about the M5 deliverable date, which I think, Jason, you've already responded to. But if there's anything further on that one, we could probably leave that one for the time being. Perfect.
Yep.
Next question. Who do I request access to CR009 from?
So all the information on CR9 is on the website, and CR9 is with Ofgem for decision at the moment. We are hoping for a response back from Ofgem this week on CR9, but all of the information is available on the website. Sorry, Jackie, I think you were probably about to say the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was me that asked the question. If I search for CI9, I get the links, etc., but it won't let me through. It doesn't give me permissions. It says I need to ask for permissions and all that sort of stuff. It's not the first time I've had collaboration-based issues with my access.
Have you tried from the website? Have you tried from the website itself? Do you get the same issue, Graham?
That's hold on. I just closed it now. That's typical. It was the MHS website address that I went to. I went through the collaboration database. I haven't been to the other database. I didn't know there was anywhere else. I've just been going to the CB.
Yeah, there's a website as well, and that's got quite a lot of the information on, including all the change request information, all the impact assessments.
Okay, but
try
I'm
it
still a bit
from
concerned about the fact
Yeah.
that I'm getting this intermittent issues with collaboration database, considering that's supposed to be the central point of where all the stuff is accessed.
Ewan, do you want to just pick up offline with Graham and maybe log a help desk ticket, Graham, and we can sort you out?
Cool, thank you.
Leave it in our hands. And also, just on that one, we've actually added the link to the change control page to the actual question itself there, Graham, as well. So hopefully you have an easy access of. But yeah, we'll pick up the issues you're facing with the collaboration base as well offline.
Thank you.
Next question about Slido formatting. So why aren't the instructions / hashtag for Slido in the meeting invites for all MHHS calls? Anyone want to take that as a particular topic?
Well, we don't use Slido for all of our calls. We've used them for a couple of the webinars. I think that's something we Jackie, Pete, probably something we can take on. There's no reason why not. It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think we should do that wherever we're doing Slido questions. Yeah, we'll take that on board. Good idea.
2 more questions. So look, next one, given the design will not be baselined until the 31st of October, are you expecting a lot of blank responses? And if so, how will you handle it?
So I think we wouldn't expect loads of blank responses because all of the artifacts that need to be impacted by any given participant are already out there. So I'm expecting most organisations to be in a position to have looked at those. But naturally, if we get lots of blank responses, we'll have to deal with that as and when we arrive with it. And that's just another data point of information that we can provide to the SRO if it turns out that a lot of participants don't feel that they're in a position to answer that question in the affirmative. Again, that's good data for the SRO to use when making their decisions.
Thank you, Pete. Really helpful. And our last question for the time being: when do you expect the DIP test environment to be fully ready for an integration test? I understand stubs are being developed for initial testing.
You want me to pick that up, Pete?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
I'll
please.
answer that one.
Yeah. So we're expecting DIP to be the first component in component integration testing in our SIT phase. So we're taking an incremental approach to adding services in as we go through SIT. So that will be aligned with the start of SIT as set out in the program replan. And as Pete said earlier, we've got a second consultation on the program replan coming out on the 12th of September. What was the second part of the question, Ewan? Sorry, it's just come off Slido.
Yeah, I believe it's just been archived. So here it goes back in. I understand
Stubs.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we are developing test stubs, as you've rightly point out, Anonymous, and they will be available for you all to use in your own participant integration testing, which we're expecting to be done before you come into SIT or qualification. So we will be developing and providing test stubs as well as running our formal SIT phases as well. And that they are also shown on the program replan.
Lovely, thank you, Jason, for that. We've actually had just one more question come in, so to quickly go through that one, we can move back on. CR9 is showing as approved on the collaboration base. Is that a program approved rather than Ofgem approved?
Yes, so that has been recommended for approval by the SRO, but because it's outside our thresholds for Ofgem approval, it's gone to Ofgem for approval. So yes, it's recommended for approval from the SRO, from the program steering group, but it does require Ofgem approval.
Lovely, thank you, Jason and Pete and everyone else who helped answer questions. No more questions for the time being.
Excellent. Cheers, Ian. Thanks everyone for the questions, and we will roll on to the next section. So this one's about service providers, and you'll be relieved to know it's not as long as the Milestone 3 section, or indeed any of them aren't as long as the Milestone 3 section. So the first question is, there's no obligation to share this information with the programme, but it'd be useful to understand the mapping between IT service providers and their clients. So this information will be treated as confidential if you choose to share it, and is gathered to map dependencies between programme participants. So asking you to please add the names of your IT service providers in the free text box and give a brief description of the service that they provide. And similarly, if you're an IT service provider yourself, please add the names of your clients if they've given permission for you to share that information. And the purpose of this is really to understand if a given IT service provider perhaps starts to fall behind in terms of the programme or is posing a risk to delivery, we can then have a very quick understanding of who else in the programme that might have an impact upon, and it maps the dependencies between them. But as I say, there's no obligation to share this information. It would purely help us to know. So moving on to the next one. So how do you plan to obtain access to metering services if required? So please tick all options that apply to your supply chain. And if you've selected multiple options, then please identify in the comments box how specific services will be sourced. So for example, you might say the smart metering services will be provided in-house, but we'll go to market for advanced metering services, let's say. And in terms of how we're defining those different metering services, I've provided a link there, which takes you to some of the design overview documentation that's been played back to you in some of the various design sessions taking place over the last few weeks. And again, you're able to select multiple options here if that's the most appropriate answer for you. Similarly, if you plan to procure metering services from a third party, then we're asking you to select the date on which you finalise or expect to finalise a contract with that provider. So please upload your procurement plan as evidence in support of your answer at the end of the survey, and that should include details of the services to be provided, the process for selecting that provider, and the expected timelines for selecting that provider too. And if you do not intend to go to market for metering services, and you don't have an estimate of when you will do so, or you don't consider this question to be applicable to your organisation, then please leave it blank, as we've done with a few of the others. And we've got a similar set of questions coming up for data services as the ones we just asked for metering services. So again, please tick all options that apply to your supply chain. And if you've selected multiple options, then please identify in the comments box how the specific services will be procured. So for example, meter data retrieval services will be provided in-house, but we'll go to market for the remainder of smart, advanced and unmetered data services. So a definition of data services, again, can be found in the design overview documentation, and that's slide 21 to 23 this time. And similarly, the second part of this data services question. If you plan to procure data services from a third party, then please select the date on which you finalised or expect to finalise a contract with them. Please upload your procurement plan as evidence to support your answer at the end of this survey. That should include details of the service to be provided, process for selecting the service provider, and expected timelines for selecting them. And again, that final sentence there is simply saying if you don't intend to go to market for data services, or you don't know when you will do so, or don't consider that to be a question to be applicable, then please leave that question blank and don't select a date. So I'll pause there again. Any other questions in there, Ewan?
Thanks, Pete. No questions really about the questions, more a question about getting a copy of the questions and the answers for the total thing. So we can probably leave that to the end and pick it up when we finish up. So yeah, please continue on.
It's fine. I'm happy to answer that now. So in terms of getting a copy of these questions, the plan is to upload an Excel file as a link on the collaboration base and make it available to participants that way. And it will be, correct me if this is wrong, Ewan, but I think it will have its own section on the collaboration base. So there'll be a few other documents relating to readiness assessments that we can link you into there. And then again, in terms of the actual set of questions to respond to, that'll be sent out in an email to all of the principal contacts on 19th of September too.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah, just confirm there will be a page on the collaboration base for readiness assessments. Yeah, and there'll be a way to access it as well. So yeah, please keep an eye out for that. Thanks, Pete. No more questions.
Great. So on to testing. So the first question is, on which date do you expect to finish your pre-integration testing, i.e. PIT? And if you do not have an estimate of when that will be, then please leave the question blank as per. And a similarly short question relating to SIT as number 43. To what extent do you agree with the following statement? My organisation is planning to be a participant in the system integration testing, i.e. SIT. And the final question on the testing section, what further information, if any, do you require in order to make a decision about SIT participation? So hopefully 3 fairly straightforward questions on testing there, but were there any questions on any of those?
No more questions.
Great. And very short section here on migration, given that it's very early doors, but we just thought we'd try and canvass as much opinion and gather information on it as we can at this early stage. To what extent do you agree with the following statement? My organisation is interested in starting migration early, as soon as central parties are ready. Again, you've got the usual options 1 to 6 between strongly disagree and strongly agree. And the second question in this section, the following question should be answered by suppliers only. Please leave it blank if you're not part of a supplier organisation. Is how long do you expect your migration of MPANs onto the new MHHS arrangements to take, assuming that there are no constraints external to your organisation? And then you've got different time periods there at roughly 3-month intervals going up to 12 months. Any questions on those ones?
Yeah, we have one more question, Pete. PIT timelines will be dependent on the replan timelines. Do we set these up as the ones set out in the second consultation?
Yes, I think that's a very sound assumption. We're working on the basis that round 2 of the replanning is the timeline that we'll be asking participants to work with and work towards when they're filling out this RA2 questionnaire. Yeah.
Brilliant. No more questions, Pete. Sorry, 2 just came in really quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Anyone, sorry about that. Migration timelines will depend on the migration type, COA, ETL, etc. More of a statement as opposed to a question, but anyone could pick that up.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the sort of thing that I think would be good to put into the comments boxes. So if you think there's minutiae that we're missing out, or nuance, sorry, that we're missing out with that question, then yeah, by all means, would appreciate putting that into the comments box.
Lovely, thanks, Pete. And last question, more of a sort of a format question about the drop downs within your questionnaire. So for those questions with a disagree or agree response, would it be possible to have an option that says we don't have a view currently at this stage?
Yes, so hopefully some of them do already have that. We've tried to be slightly picky with which ones do and don't. Is it so in terms of this migration one, that could be an area we could add one in, yeah. Organisation interested to start migration early. Yeah, that's a very fair point. Would you mind noting that down, Ewan, just so you remember number 47?
Yeah, would it? No more questions at this stage.
Okay, and so this is the last section we've got here on programme feedback. So first of all, how satisfied are you with the programme's mechanisms to keep you informed of MHHS activities in progress? And then we've got a list of different current mechanisms that are used here. So the collaboration base, the clock, the design newsletter, feedback from constituency reps at level 2 and 3 working groups, the level 4 working groups themselves, the webinars like this one, open days like the ones coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and bilateral meetings held with the PPC. Obviously, there's a lot of different options in there, and you may be satisfied with some and dissatisfied with others. But given that we didn't want to burden you all with 10, 15 different questions, it would be great if you could sort of give an overall response here. And then if there are any particularly that you are satisfied or dissatisfied with, perhaps put those in the comments box so we can take more targeted action there. And question 53, how satisfied are you with the communication and engagement activities undertaken by the Programme Party Coordinator, PPC team to date? So again, appreciate that not everyone may be aware of what the PPC team does, so that's absolutely fine if you want to put that as your first option. And then we've got the usual 1 to 6 following that. Next up is, to what extent do you agree with the following statement? My organisation requires additional support from the central programme team in delivering the MHHS programme, and if additional support is needed, please specify what's required in the comments box. So again, I think if there's a sort of answer that's agree, mostly agree or strongly agree, then please add something into the comments box here so we know exactly how we can help. And the final question, it's not really a question in its own right, it's simply the place to upload the files that have been requested in previous questions. And I've just put a little reminder in here as to exactly what we've asked for previously. So the programme plan, 6 points of contact, design impact assessment, and then if applicable, the procurement plan or the internal plans for DBT. But again, those ones may not be applicable given, or rather depending on what you've answered to those questions that are listed there as well. So with that, I'll sort of open it up for a more overall Q&A. Was there anything else popped through yet, Ewan?
Yeah, we have one sort of official question on the Slido with respect to SIT. On SIT, can you please remind me or summarise the benefits of taking part in SIT? It's a more general one about SIT there.
Do you want me to pick that up, Pete?
Yeah, feel free. Yeah.
So the benefits of participating in SIT is that you'll be able to move into migration earlier than programme parties that go through qualification. We're looking at the migration approach at the moment and what approach we take to those back end activities. But the programme has always said, we want to encourage parties to start migration early so that you can reap the benefits of MHHS as early as possible. So that's what we're looking at in our options assessment for migration. And the benefits of doing SIT is that you can start your migration activities early and start bringing your customers into MHHS.
And it may be linked to that, Jason, but the one I was going to go to is the fact that I believe it's an assumption of the programme at the moment is that any organisation that's successfully been through SIT, that obviates the need for them to then go through the qualification process. I think that needs to be confirmed, but that's the current working assumption as I understand it, right?
So yes, for the testing element of qualification, but there are 3 elements of qualification. There is a process element for the governance bodies, for Elexon and RETCO for qualification, and SECAS for accession to SEC. And then we will also be doing some assurance work around seeking evidence of testing of back office systems as well. So yes, there's equivalence for the testing element of qualification, but that's not all of qualification. There is still a process and assurance element around qualification as well.
Lovely, thank you, Jason and Pete. A question more sort of around replan and RA2. So question asks, replan and RA2 end on the same date. Will you be assessing these together to validate responses into the 3rd consultation?
So the primary purpose of the Readiness Assessment 2 is in order to allow us to do or to allow the SRO to make a decision going into Milestone 3. But so I haven't had any discussions yet with the PMO team about whether or not the data from RA2 will be used as part of the replan. I think the reason for that will be that their consultation process is rather different to the RA2 one. So we've only asked a few quite high-level questions about the replan in Readiness Assessment 2, whereas I know in the various rounds of the replanning exercise, I think there are a lot more questions and they get quite a lot more specific about replanning. So I'm not sure there's a huge amount of overlap, but yeah, I'll gladly take it away as a point to go and speak to the PMO team and see if there's anything we can work out that might be able to reduce the reporting burden on participants.
Thanks, Pete. So currently no more specific questions within the Slido. Was anyone else sort of present on the call like to raise a hand for any more sort of general questions and answers, or is that it? It looks, Pete, like we've answered as many questions we could. No more questions in Slido or on the chat.
Great, and I know you wanted a few minutes at the end to talk about various different comms mechanisms as well. Is now a good time for you to do that?
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. Lovely. So yeah, so I guess to finish up today's webinar, we wanted to just highlight the various sort of communication channels that are on offer to you as part of the program. As you can see, there are a wide variety of potential methods and formats to get in touch with us or get support from the program. If you'd like to raise a question or wish to engage with the program or require support on something, please do so on one of these sort of highlighted methods here. I'd like to sort of flag as well that we haven't included it here, but there is obviously the MHHS website as well, which you can contact and find support if you can't find it. And yeah, please do so. So we encourage you to sort of take away that and try and get in touch with us on the bilats or the playbacks. Obviously the collaboration base, which is regularly updated by the team, and then coming up we have the Mhhs Open Day on the 6th of September, so hopefully we'll see you all there, and you have a list of email contacts within the collaboration base under the help center as well if you cannot find the answer you're looking for. One thing I'd like to flag as well is we have the IT help desk. So if you are struggling with a particular point on the website or on the collaboration base, please do email IT help desk and they will get to get back in touch with you and hopefully help answer the question. Just to finish up, the poll for the webinar is now live on the Slido. So if you go onto Slido and then click onto polls, please will you fill that in and let us know your feedback, and we obviously take on board any feedback and try to address it as well. So thank you for that. No, nothing more from me, Pete.
Just to build on that, Ewan, and particularly given the question from Graham earlier. So mhssprogram.co.uk is open. So if you haven't got access to the collaboration base, then please go and check out the website. You'll find a lot of the information is available on the website. Anything that that needs to be behind closed doors is on the collaboration base, but a lot of what you might need in terms of content, news and documents is on the MHS website, and that is unrestricted access. So do bear in mind that as another route through to find information out of the programme.
Lovely, thanks, Jackie.
Perfect. Well, with that, unless there are any other questions, I think that was it from our side. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining. And yeah, I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
questions.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
folks.